season 2 of the Hiring Librarians podcast. We talk about hiring, getting hired, and broader career issues for librarians, archivists, and other folks in information service professions. I'm your host, Emily Week. This podcast is part of my work on the site hiringlibrarians.com, where I've spent more than a decade asking questions, complex, stupid, and everywhere in between, to LIS workers on both sides of the hiring table. This episode was recorded on April 10th, 2025. Hello, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in podcast land. This is Emily with the Hiring Librarians podcast. I'm here with Jay from the Library Punk podcast, who kindly has come on my podcast to talk about his move from academic libraries to public libraries, which is definitely the idea of changing library types is sort of of perpetual interest to folks. So I'm really interested to talk to him about how he managed it, how he's finding it, and all of that other stuff. So hi, Jay.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Doing okay.
So I guess to hop right into it, will you tell us a little bit about your career path, how you arrived in libraries, maybe a little bit more about what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I arrived in libraries because when I was in undergrad, my student job was in my college's music library, and I had a wonderful supervisor mentor who actually treated us like adults. And we weren't just doing shelving, right? I got to do cool projects, and I decided, wow, I really like this kind of work. And I talked with her about it, and she helped me through the process of applying to grad schools and everything, and is still a mentor figure to me today. So that's sort of how I arrived in libraries. I went to library school right out of undergrad.
I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm. But I had a lot more experience than some other folks because of how good that supervisor had been and how much experience she had given me, which I think really helped me out. And then my first job at a library school was a residency.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, when those were still happening. Although when I went into library school, I knew I wanted to be in cataloging. It took a while for me to get there. Mm-hmm. I had a, quote, metadata job for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Then I was a music librarian for a little bit. And now I am a proper cataloging librarian now. And this is my first public library job as well.
So you're saying this is where you wanted to be when you started library school? At
least with cataloging, yes. I didn't necessarily care academic or public where I ended up. I just wanted to make sure I was in cataloging. But I really like it.
So now you are living your dream and you can check it off and retire tomorrow? Has it been fantastic? Or
I actually really like the type of role that I'm in. I've been kind of admin management before, because my last job I was a solo librarian, but I had the title of library director, and I supervised student workers, and I don't think I'm politically good at being.
Do you mean because of your politics, or do you mean because of departmental politics?
I personally felt uncomfortable telling people what to do and having that level of control and power over people. So
sure.
Yeah. So I like the kind of work that I'm doing right now.
Yeah. If I guess if you worked at a co-op, you still wouldn't be a boss. Would that be an ideal job for you, to work at a co-op library in the cataloging department?
I guess, yeah, because I wouldn't mind being a little bit as long as I'm not pure admin, as long as I get to keep doing my work, I'm okay maybe taking on supervisory roles or a little more levels of responsibility, but I don't know if I'm wanting to do that right now in my career.
It's interesting because this is the question I ask pretty much everybody when they start on the podcast. And many people talk about being in places where they wanted to be somewhere and they got there and then they hated it. And so they're somewhere else entirely, or they're somewhere where they're I never imagined I would be doing this. And it's wonderful or it's okay. This it's interesting to hear this sort of kind of a quick path, right, to your dream job.
Yeah, like
Um,
less than a decade, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I am interested to hear a little bit about, and I didn't warn you that I wanted to talk about this, so you can refuse. Um, but I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about your experience doing your residency.
Yeah. So I did my residency at the University of Utah.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it was a quote unquote like diversity residency.
Mm-hmm.
I will give the caveat that I'm white.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, I think those diversity residencies are meant ideally for people of color,
Yeah.
but I don't think legally you
Yeah.
can be like restrict it to specific races. So I'm like a queer person, a white queer person who got into a diversity residency. Make of that what you will. And again, I already knew I wanted to be a cataloging librarian.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like a residency that was sort of like it was like 2 years. I was faculty and I had all the same expectations as tenure track faculty, but
Mm.
without being tenure track, I was contract.
Wow.
Yeah, so I
Uh-huh.
published 2 peer-reviewed journal articles and helped write a book in my 2 years there because I had all the same expectations that my tenured colleagues did. Every sort of
Yeah.
academic semester, I like rotated kind of where I was in the library with the end
Mhm.
goal of me doing a lot of stuff with the sort of digital library metadata folks. So I really liked that experience, actually. I am glad that they like fostered my like desire to be like, yes, I'm cataloging metadata, whatever, but I'm really good at doing instruction and I like working with the public, and making sure that both of those skills were like nurtured was really good for me, I think, ultimately in my career. Even though I don't have your sort of standard cataloger experience, I like that I have a lot of instruction
Mhm.
experience. So,
Interesting. I
mhm.
I've heard I remember 10 years ago thinking residencies were such a wonderful idea to precisely that, I think, to help diversify a profession by making sure that there are opportunities for folks that were maybe not traditionally
Mhm.
felt welcome. But there's this shift now of those residencies actually turned out to not be great for a lot of folks.
Yeah, no, it kind of bit me in the ass a little
Hmm.
bit, if I'm
Hmm.
allowed to
Yeah,
say
totally.
ass.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
see ads.
Yeah, like because like so many cataloging and metadata jobs are very, I would say, narrow-minded about the kind of experience they're after.
Mm-hmm.
I don't check a lot of those boxes.
Hmm.
I think when you were on Library Punk, I said that like all of my jobs have basically been people taking a chance on me
Right. Yeah.
because I didn't have the experience of their ideal candidate, but they like saw in me something. I didn't really touch a
Hmm.
mark record for most of my career, even though like I had one of the best cataloging professors who's ever lived. I'm good at cataloging, but I just
Hmm.
never did it in jobs. And yeah, I got hired into my current position. I didn't know what to do with discovery layers, and yet my first job after that residency was doing a part half of it was maintaining a discovery layer. So it's maybe not the ideal way to set someone up for tech services. I'll say that. I hope the sort of general idea of who makes a good fit for cataloging and tech services is starting to change,
Hmm.
but I've unfortunately just met a lot of very narrow-minded
Hmm.
like ideas of like what people are looking for because they're not willing to train people, and so they want you to have the exact experience that like, have you worked with this ILS, have you done these workflows? If
Right.
not, we don't have
Right.
time or money to train you. So
Right. Which to me is like the most basic kind of skill. Like, have you worked
yeah.
with the software? Like, that to me is the most trainable thing. It's
Yeah.
more sort of the problem solving or the decisions or the creative thinking that those are the things
Right.
that are harder to train. Well, I guess so. Well, I did want to ask too, like, do you regret going from undergrad to grad school, or do you regret that's kind of prejudice? Do you regret that terrible decision that you made? I mean, it obviously wasn't a terrible decision, but like for many, I like it's not something I would recommend to someone now.
Mhm.
So, how do you feel about having made that decision?
I mainly did it for financial reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I got my BA in English,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that however long after graduating, I would have to start paying my student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, and who knows if I would have been able to get a job. And I come from a below the poverty line
Mm-hmm.
family. I got a lot of like Pell Grants and stuff to go to college, but I still had to take out some loans.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do if I can't start paying those back. But I knew if I was in school.
That's
Yeah.
you're reminding me of my dad. My dad always says that he has a PhD because he was trying to get out of the Vietnam War. So
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about your switch from your
Mm-hmm.
academic job to your current job, your dream job. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so why and where were you looking when you decided to leave? Did you know that you were going to switch library types, or were you just yeah?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I decided to look for a new job because, again, financial reasons.
Mhm.
The job that I was in, a year after I started that job, they told me they were reducing my position to 3/4 time,
Oh, uh-huh.
which therefore I wasn't legally eligible for unemployment.
Uh-huh.
And I still kept all my benefits, but my
Mhm.
salary reduced by $20,000
Oh,
basically
geez.
overnight.
Yeah.
And I was getting into massive credit card debt
Uh-huh.
because it was like hard to pay off my bills and stuff.
Mhm.
And they're like, we don't know if this is a temporary position or not. Like,
They didn't
because of
know
budget.
how long you were
Yeah.
going to be 3/4. Yeah.
Yeah. And it got to be like, I can't wait around.
Mhm.
And they were trying to make me take on other work, like to basically contract out
Mhm.
me
Hmm.
for other work.
Mhm.
But it just like wasn't good for my mental health or my physical health. And I was just getting more and more in debt.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for a new job, and I was applying to everything that I was even remotely qualified for. Even if I wasn't qualified for it, I was still
Mhm.
like, maybe something will bite. And so I was applying to academic, I was applying to public, I was applying to special. Like I was kind of applying to everything as
Yeah.
long as it was like in the greater Boston
Uh-huh.
area, because I didn't have the money
To
to
move.
move
Yeah.
or the desire to move for like the first time in my life. I
Uh-huh.
actually quite like it here.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't really want to move, but
You said that you had done some supervising. Have you done hiring yourself?
so I had been on a hiring committee
Mm-hmm.
before. Actually, when I in my residency, one of the things they did was they put me on a
Oh, sure.
hiring committee so I
Uh-huh.
could get experience doing that.
Uh-huh.
I didn't get to pick they were called graduate fellows at my previous job, my student workers. They were like fellowship students, so I didn't pick them. But I did I did the hiring process of two like student employees where they weren't fellowship employees. So I
Uh-huh.
went through that process. So that was like interesting to like come up with interview questions and like
Mhm.
it, I didn't it was real hard like sending out the emails to tell people no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't have the constitution for this.
Yeah. Especially students, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, who were in the library every day. Like I knew their names, they loved being in there, and I had to tell
Oh,
some of them no. I did not like that. So
yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing what you were telling me earlier about not wanting to be a supervisor.
no, yeah.
So did your knowledge of hiring, did you think about that, or did that get incorporated into how you searched for work, or?
Yeah, it definitely like, especially at least on the academic side, it sort of I knew the timeline,
Mhm.
right? And I kind of knew the statistics, I guess. It's like, well,
Right.
if I get a phone interview, that means I'm like one of 6 people
Right.
out of the pool,
Right.
right? If I get it on campus, if I get a second interview, I'm probably one of 3.
Uh-huh.
Right. Like I kind of, and I knew sort of the timelines of like an academic job from like time to submit to like start date. It's going to be like 6 months. You know, when I was in grad
Yes.
school,
Yeah.
one of my supervisors told me, if you want a job by the time you graduate or by the time the next school year starts, you better start applying by the time Thanksgiving break rolls around, just because you never know. So I definitely knew the timeline, and I knew, like, from the experience of reading cover letters, what do I like to see in a cover letter? That doesn't necessarily mean that's what everybody likes in a cover letter, but having read some bad cover letters, you know, I knew how to at least not write a bad one.
Did you have to write a cover letter for your current job, your public library job?
No, which was scary.
Yeah.
So the public library where I work, you upload your resume and that's it.
No supplemental questions?
There are some, but they're not specific to the job, really. And if there are multiple positions open at this location, you don't submit separate application materials for it. And so I applied to like 6 jobs because anytime a new job would come online for them, I was like, well, might as well, and like submit to it, right? My partner is actually doing the same exact thing right now because he's looking for jobs, and he's like, well, I know how this process works, and so he's just applying to everything here because he's like, well, I don't have to resubmit something. But what I did instead of a cover letter was I did an annotated CV.
But you still did a CV for your public library job?
Yeah, I did a CV. I did a highly abridged CV. But I still did a CV. Whereas like in the past, I'd done like very traditionally academic like CVs where I just literally everything and no annotations, just here's the stuff. Right. Yeah. So this was the first time I like I'm like, I guess I'm far enough along in my career that I could take things off and still have a lot left on. Yeah.
I'm far enough in my career that I should take a lot of stuff off, but I always have a very difficult time going goodbye to you. Because sometimes they're like my precious babies.
And the annotated CV idea was actually my partner's. I had never done. Yeah, like I'd only done an annotated CV for like when I had a tenure track job, and I had to submit that as part of my like annual review. I had to do an annotated CV, but I had never done one for a job, and so he does annotated CVs and tailors them to like every type of job he does or applies for. And so that was his idea.
I've actually not heard the term annotated CV before. Does it mean specifically, it sounds like it means you're pulling things off that aren't applicable and you're writing more explanation about what is on there?
But you don't necessarily have to take stuff off. It's kind of like how in a resume, how you might be like, in this job I did XYZ or whatever. I got to kind of do a cover letter and a CV all in one because I like got to like annotate, like, in this job I did XYZ, and you know.
Yeah.
And I did it kind of sometimes in paragraph form, sometimes in bullet points. Obviously not super long.
And how did you learn how to do that? Did he just helped you with it, or did you look at other examples or talk to other folks?
Yeah, he had shown me his examples, including one that he got for the job that he was in at the time, like the one he used for that. And then I think I asked around, and like folks showed me their annotated CVs. When again I was doing like tenure stuff, my colleagues had shown me their annotated CVs in that context. So I'd seen an annotated CV before. You
said that you were sort of applying pretty much everywhere. How are you finding the jobs to apply to?
So ALA job list was one. There's also the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. They have a job board. Simmons Library School has a job board, although that has a lot more opportunities for really early career folks. So it's not always relevant to where I'm at in my career. The Code for Lib job board, which I don't have like systems or coding experience, but sometimes they'll have like metadata things on there, especially remote metadata jobs. And then listservs are a huge one.
Any in particular?
I know for cataloging, AutoCat
Uh-huh.
tends to have like a lot of cataloging jobs tend to get published there. I was on the Music Library Association listserv,
Uh-huh.
so I would just like look there. I would say for in general, like whatever type of library role you're wanting to be in, find what the sort of like industry standard listserv is for that and get on it.
Mhm. Um, did you keep records during your search? Like, did you have some people have like a spreadsheet or a what is an Airtable? Is that the ones that archivists always use?
Yeah, I am so bad at spreadsheets. Like, that's not the kind of brain I have. I was way better about
Yeah.
this when I was in grad school and applying to my first job. I had a
Hmm.
Trello board set up, like to like a
Hmm.
Kanban board to
Hmm.
like track, like, okay, here's all the jobs, and
Hmm.
then these are the ones I've written cover letters for. These cover letters are being reviewed by people right now. I've sent these out. I've gotten to this interview stage
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
one. And then I would use Zotero
Uh-huh.
to use like the clipping feature.
Oh. Uh-huh.
But you could do this with OneNote or anything else where if
Uh-huh.
you like save a web page
Uh-huh.
with Zotero, it takes a screenshot
Uh-huh.
of the entire web page so that it's preserved in time in
Mhm.
case the job posting got taken down,
Yes, which they do.
in which they do. So I would recommend find some
Mhm.
way of saving the web page. This is also
Mhm.
good just so that you have, if you get the job, you have the job description. You might not always
Mhm.
have the job description readily available to you in that job. So it's useful just to even have that information in your job. I did not do that
Yeah.
this time
Uh-huh.
around. I think I was too burnt out
Uh-huh.
and unwell to be on top of my game like that. It was more just like being anxious, checking 24/7 and like applying as soon as something came up. Which
Yeah.
I don't recommend.
Yeah.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm glad that you're saying it because when I talk to people, I often talk to people who are like, I have the perfect way to search. Here's my, or here's my highly detailed way of searching, and here's how I did perfect record keeping as a librarian. And I think it's much more common that people are in the situation where they're like, I'm just gonna apply to a bunch of jobs and hopefully somebody hires me,
Yep.
and it's not perfect or it's not, I don't know, the tip top of organization. Oh, hey, just a quick interruption. Did you miss season 1 of this podcast? I had some great guests like Ray Pun, Katrina Dibis-Kendrick, Meredith Lowe from Archives Gig, and ALA President Sam Helmick. You can find these episodes, as well as the interview questions repository, peer-reviewed resumes and CVs, and lots of other great stuff on hiringlibrarians.com. It sounds like you were in the mindset where you were just sort of applying all the time. Did you do anything where you sort of set aside time that you were going to not apply, or things that you did specifically to take care of yourself during your job search?
There were definitely times where I was getting kind of like obsessively focused
Mm-hmm.
on it, like out of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where that's sort of all I could think about. And so I would just kind of refresh
Mm-hmm.
the pages. And
Mm-hmm.
so there would be times where like I would be like, okay, I am not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
And instead I'm gonna like watch a movie with my partner
Mm-hmm.
or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of it was like I need to find something else to do that's distracting enough and good for me that I can stop thinking about this, but also just like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just feel bad.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess that, yeah. Sometimes you just feel bad.
Sometimes you just feel bad, man.
Um, uh, so how do you prepare for interviews?
Okay, so I love preparing for interviews. I was reflecting earlier with some folks. I don't think I interview well, but not because I'm bad at like I'm very outgoing and extroverted and I love to yap. So you would think I'm a great interview candidate,
Mhm.
but I think my personality scares people. I don't know. But what I like to do is try to see like if the names of the search committee were given to me, like in an email thread or something, I like to look them up, see like what are they working on, have they published anything, just so I get a sense of who they are. I like going to the library's website and looking at like, do they have a mission statement? You know, do they have a strategic plan? Do they have like these kinds of documents so that I can situate the job and the way that I respond to them within that mission statement? I like to see, is there any kind of projects coming out of that department? If I know someone there, I might be like, hey, if you can tell me anything, would love to hear it. And sometimes like I can't, and I'm like, okay, you know, I respect that. But sometimes that's like, you know, what kind of stuff is what should I know about this place? I hate to be like, sometimes it is who you know. Sometimes that helps a lot though.
It does help a lot. Yeah. And I think not just in sort of a like getting information that maybe isn't public, but also just in terms of having a support system or having people that, like you said earlier, that you think most of your jobs were people taking a chance on you.
Yes.
And so I would maybe push back at your characterization of not interviewing well or having, you said, I think people are frightened by my personality. Is that what you said?
I don't think I necessarily have the personality of a cataloger.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way that you are talking and telling me, and the things that I know about you from doing the podcast or from seeing the way that you interact with folks on social media is, I think that you do have strong social networks. You have people that do want to take chances on you. And like that, I think is very important.
Yeah. And like, also like knowing folks maybe at institutions I'm applying to, not in a give me behind the scenes details about the interview, like not in a cheating kind of way, but also it's just like, do you like working there?
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
You know?
Yeah. Like what? Yeah.
Like, what should I know?
Yeah. Or like, should I run away?
Yeah. What are the red flags? Well, how's the admin like? Do you like working for this person if we're going to be working for the same people? Like,
yeah,
it's good. That's good to know, you know?
Totally. Which kind of segues to my next question, which is, did you have any particular red or green flags that you found in job applications or on websites where you would say, oh, well, this is a place that I definitely want to work at, or a place that there's no way I would ever want to work at this place?
So I learned my lesson with my previous job. I had people warn me about my previous job, saying that is the job of about 6 people, and they're not going to pay you enough for the amount of labor that they're asking of you. But I was desperate and took it anyway. And they were absolutely right. That was not a job I was supported in. Whereas, so when I was looking for jobs, even though I was still desperate, I was like, okay, is this the job of 6 people? The last place I worked at was like a small private institution, which like you would think like private schools are where the money is. And if it's a small private, no, it's not. So sort of like looking at like, how much money does this place have? What's their funding like? Are they going to drop me in like a year? Right? If something was union, that was always good. For at least like in an interview, when I got to the final stage interview of my current job, one of the sessions, because even though it's a public library, I still had sort of the like half day in-person interview. And one of the sessions was with people who I might be working with, people who report to the person I'm now reporting to, all together without the search committee in there, especially without the manager, so that I could ask honestly what it's like to work for that person, so they could give me, so they could tell me honestly how they feel working for that person, what I might want to know actually reporting to this person, what their style is like and all that. And I think that's a great thing, like to sort of allow current employees to talk to a potential employee like that. I spent the whole time just asking about like, what's it like to be in the union and do union stuff. So I totally didn't even ask about working for my supervisor, but I liked that was part of the interview process.
Yeah. Did you have guarantees that they weren't also evaluating you, or
yes,
you did? That's
Yeah.
something that I always think about because I do think about those sort of opportunities to ask questions, but then I also think about people are sneaky or,
Yeah.
so um, I think we should get a little bit more into the differences between public and academic. So we talked a little bit about the idea that you don't write a cover letter. Are there any
hmm
other big standouts to applying?
Yeah. So with public, usually you're like applying through a city as well, since like
Mm-hmm.
technically if you're in a public library, you're an employee of that city. And so
Mm-hmm.
you might have to go through like that bureaucracy. And like I had to pass certain background checks
Mm-hmm.
about like working with children.
Mm-hmm.
Am I safe to work? Even though I don't work
Yeah.
with kids,
Yeah, totally.
but
Yeah.
like there were certain background checks I had to pass.
Mhm. There's also sometimes vaccinations. Which,
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, did I? I don't remember. I think I had to be. Oh, at least with like the interview process, I didn't have to do a presentation, which I know for academic libraries, a lot of times you like in all of my academic library jobs and in all of those, in most of the interviews I've ever had, I've had to do like a presentation during like the all day 9 to 5. I mean, that was before COVID. I
yeah,
don't know how many places are still doing that.
I think it's on its way out, but they're definitely it's not out.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, is the public library application process easier?
I think it depends on which public library
Sure. Yeah.
you're at. Like I said, a lot of times you're applying through a city,
Hmm.
and so that city's like job application portal, as
Yeah.
it were, is not tailored to library stuff or like an academic institution where it's tailored to higher ed,
Hmm.
right? It's just literally any city job will go through there. And so
Yeah.
it's way more just like broad information, retype all of your experience, even though it's in your resume, and
Hmm.
then upload your resume and hope for the best. I got to see the status of my applications.
Hmm.
So if I was being considered, I got to see the status. It was very funny. I'd been in this job for a couple months and I finally got the rejections from something. I was like, I thought I withdrew from those, obviously.
Yeah.
um, so that was interesting. If you're at a smaller public, I know sometimes you just like email people like your
Yeah.
CV, your resume and cover letter
Yeah.
directly. Like it really depends. Whereas like with academic, usually it's like your CV, a cover letter. Sometimes you have to make like a diversity statement. You sometimes like the questionnaire or whatever that you fill out is pretty detailed. Whereas like as like a city employee, it's kind of bare minimum, at least
Yeah.
in my experience.
That's a good thing for you to point out because it is, I think, especially different rural versus city public libraries because you will often in a more rural library be emailing the director or the
hmm
board. It's definitely not as in general, not as there isn't a big bureaucracy for you to go through.
Yeah, like I actually did apply to a couple of public library director positions, and because I had library director in my title, so I was like,
Yeah.
whatever, I'll go for it. They were like smaller public libraries, and for those, it was contracted companies
Mm.
that were putting out
Of
the call.
recruiters. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
who like had to apply like through them instead of through the city.
Hmm.
So that's if you're high enough in your career or you have no sense of shame, like I do. You might run into that for higher level public positions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there definitely are, public library directors that are solo librarians, just as they're academic library directors. I wonder, like, sometimes when I think of the difference, I'm a person who lived on the West Coast and now I live in the South. And people are always
hmm
asking me, whoa, that was that's a big jump. It must be really culturally different. And I think it is, but the cultural difference for me, mainly, I think is, and now I live in the suburbs, and that's a whole
Mm.
nother ball of wax. So I'm thinking now that's a major difference between library types. Like we talk so frequently about the differences between public and academic or special libraries, and I think less frequently about you can have a very, very different experience at a public library in the country and a public library
Yes.
the city. What else? Do other things stand out to you as different between the two processes?
I will say that where I work, the time frame felt academic because of all of the city bureaucracy. Even after I was offered the position, it had to then go through the city, and that took a couple of months. And so weirdly, it was on an academic time frame, kind of, which I think for a lot of people who haven't worked in academia, that would stress them out.
Yeah.
Whereas like I was expecting that, right? And I'll also say that where I work is kind of unique. Even though I am at a public library, the cataloging department and the types of stuff that's cataloged at my public library is probably not reflective or representative of most public library like tech services departments, if they even have them. Most of the catalogers I work with come from academic libraries.
It's just another thing too that's making me think about the differences between sizes of libraries and locations. Yeah. So we probably want to start thinking about moving towards wrapping up, but I have a whole giant list of questions, like half of which I haven't asked you. Is there anything where you're like, I really want to talk about this?
I know you wanted me to maybe bring up like the salary negotiation.
Yes, definitely.
Differences.
We talked about that when I was on Library Punk.
So my position is union, and our collective bargaining agreement has like specific salary grades and then steps within those grades. And I knew what salary grade this position was going in. It said it right there. But what step I would be offered was another thing entirely. So I've only negotiated my salary once, because my first job, it was contract and it was like, no, this is how much you're making, and there's no negotiation. It was cool. My second job, I felt no need to negotiate because it was so high, and they told me that the reason why it was so high was because I had authored a book.
No.
So I was like, cool, I'm happy with that number. Thank you. For my previous job, I did negotiate my salary because I was like, I'm leaving a union tenure track position, make it worth my time and money. And they got up to a certain point, and then I negotiated like pay for my professional association for X many years, and I want this much professional development money for at least like 2 or 3 years. So I did negotiate that. This position, again, there was room to negotiate, but what they offered me, I was happy with. So I didn't feel the need to negotiate. But the resume that I applied with, when they offered me the job, they were like, now send us a resume that has every single bit of relevant experience on it, even if it's from when you were in school. Because that time length, and if it's relevant, will be used to decide what step you are at. So I put in the fact that I worked in a music library in undergrad on that resume. I put my graduate practicum that I did for like 6 weeks. I literally just like put anything in there. And it worked. I got put right in the middle of the salary grade. It was more than I was expecting. I was fully expecting them to be like, you don't have a ton of exact experience. We're going to put you at like step 1 or 2. Right. And no, I'm like right in the middle. And I get really nice raises every year because unions. Yeah, because you're still, yeah. So I don't know how common that is with other places of like how HR decides where to place somebody. Because it's not like the salary I could negotiate, it was the step. Yeah. I could maybe negotiate. If I wasn't happy with the step they were going to offer me, I could maybe make a case for a different step, but I liked the step. So I was like, nope, I'm okay with this.
Who gave you that advice to give that mega resume?
The person hiring me.
The library staff person, not the HR person.
Correct. Yeah. The person who is my manager now was like, now the resume that we give to them to decide your step, put literally everything on it. Yeah. And I was like,
It seems like that's a person that is on your team. That seems really cool.
Extremely. Yes. Yeah. I enjoy working for this person.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up, because I did really want to make sure that we talked about that, because I think sometimes people, and salary negotiation is super important because it's important to come in at, because that's the basis, as you say, particularly if you're stepped, everything comes off of that. but I think it's also something that people get really nervous about.
Hmm.
Do you now when you were speaking, I was like, oh, he's very confident about salary negotiation. Is that true?
Yeah, I've only had to do it
Uh-huh.
once, and I was very nervous doing it
Hmm.
because I was desperate, and I was like,
Hmm.
I don't. This is the only sort of job that's bitten, right? And
Hmm.
I was nervous. I was like, oh no, what if they like counter or then say like never mind
Right.
or whatever. But I think like when I was firm that one time and being like, listen, I'm leaving a tenure track
Hmm.
job that gets paid this much. I
Hmm.
want at least this much. And then getting to negotiate the like professional development aspect of it. I'm like, okay, if you're not going to raise my salary up anymore, can you add in this and this? So people
Hmm.
listening, salary negotiation isn't just your salary, it's other things as well. Like ask if whatever
Yeah.
tech, like computer or whatever you're going to need, like what that is like, because that might be something you need to negotiate as
Yeah.
well. I haven't had to, but it could be. But definitely like if you can have them pay for your professional development, if that's not already something they do, like see if you can get that, because it helps.
One of the public library jobs I had, I couldn't negotiate salary. It was the same thing. It was stepped, and I was like very clearly in this step, but I wanted to go to a few conferences that year, and in this system, only certain people were allowed to go to
Mm,
conferences. So I said, but you have to send me to these conferences, and that was the negotiation that I did.
hmm.
Um, what else should we talk about? Anything else we should talk about?
I think this question about my political views and my social media presence and the fact that I have a podcast,
Uh-huh.
I actually really wanted to address this.
Yes, let's do it.
Because it's like not impossible to find out what my last name is or who I
Yeah.
am or where I work.
Yeah.
But like on my podcast, I
Hmm.
don't say my last name, or if I
Hmm.
accidentally say where I work, Justin bleeps it out. And that's mainly now like I just got out of my probation period. So it was mainly like I don't want
Hmm.
to jeopardize this probation period. My
Hmm.
my manager knows I have a podcast. He doesn't know which one, but he said like, as long as it's not that I can't say where I work, but as long as it's
Hmm.
clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of
Uh-huh.
the library. And so I just like to be very like not even get in the weeds
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that's like one thing that I do, but as far as like my politics and stuff, like I'm very open about my support of Palestine on social media and on the podcast. I
Hmm.
am very open about my political views in general on my social media and the podcast. I'm pretty candid about queerness and
Hmm.
stuff in
Hmm.
general. So anytime I'm job hunting, I lock down my social media just in case.
Hmm.
As soon as the job is in the
Hmm.
bag and signed, sealed, delivered, then I come off. But I
Hmm.
definitely go on lockdown during that whole hunt, and I recommend other people do as well, just because you never know. So, especially in our current political
Yeah.
climate in the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at least while searching for work, but like it's pretty like I put the fact that I was on the executive board of my union on my
Hmm.
CV,
Hmm.
for example, because especially if it's a union workplace,
Hmm.
I don't hide that, like
Yeah.
I don't want to work for a place where I would have to hide that.
Yeah.
I was open about the fact, like I asked about the union in the interviews, like right out of the gate, and that didn't turn them away.
Hmm.
So I'm very open about that. And a lot of my work, I mean, all of our work is inherently political, but a
Right.
lot of my work is inherently political, especially around like the homosaurus and a lot of the
Yeah.
queer metadata stuff that
Yeah.
I've done. I also don't necessarily hide the fact that I'm trans. I don't necessarily broadcast it, but I don't hide it either. So
Hmm.
like there are certain things about just the way I exist that I can't hide.
Hmm.
So, you know, it's, my work doesn't have to see me like posting about whatever on social media, but there are
Hmm.
other just facts about me that are politicized or that I would never be able to
Yeah.
hide. So,
Yeah. episode that I just taped was with Katie Quirin Manwiller, who does a lot of scholarship around disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
talking about disclosing disabilities in interviews. Because once you disclose you have a disability, then you have civil rights protections, but then you also have, whatever bullshit people have in their brains about disabilities,
Right.
and just that. But she was also saying, if you are not desperate, it is a wonderful way to gauge how this workplace is going to be when you inevitably have to ask for accommodations while you're working.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing some sort of similar, like, I need to be who I am. I need you to accept who I am. And I need to be able to gauge that as part of my interview process.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. So I guess before we wrap up, is there any other advice that you want to share with folks? Or is there anything that you want to recommend? And it can be absolutely anything. It doesn't have to have anything to do with libraries.
I would say, and I have this book right here.
You know,
I would
hold it up
say
for the
read.
podcast. Yeah.
I sure can. The book Democracy is Power,
Uh-huh.
Rebuilding Unions from the Bottom Up, or just anything about unionizing your workplace or what it's like to do labor organizing. I will say, I know people are scared right now because of the NLRB and all of that. There were a lot of our colleagues in the South in public services cannot collectively bargain, and they still unionize and do very effective and successful labor organizing. So I look to them for inspiration. Labor Notes is a great resource for that. So yeah, unionize or just organize, learn how to do a one-on-one, all that. And just for fun, I'm reading Berserk right now. It's great. So I'm like, that's like all I can talk about. So I'm just like
Berserk?
recommending it
What
to
is it?
people. Berserk. It's this Japanese manga series.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. So that's just like for fun. That's what I'm reading right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it? What kind of manga is it?
It's very dark.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't like dark stuff, maybe don't read it.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, it's,
Well, isn't that novel?
Yeah.
If you don't like it, don't read it.
yeah, I know. Wow.
Crazy.
So
What a
I
crazy
know.
idea.
But it's fantasy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to my guest, Jay. If you'd like to support this podcast and my work on hiringlibrarians.com, you can find my PayPal by visiting the site, or you can go to patreon.com/hiringlibrarians. I'd also love to hear from you about any little thing at all. You can email me at hiringlibrarians@gmail.com. The theme tune was written and performed by Matthew Travers. Thanks, Matthew.